Coming to paperback and e-readers, Esteem Horror in the Hamptons. The aspiring angel tries to escape a house of horrors in this all-new Esteem series adventure. Pre-order your copy of Esteem Horror in the Hamptons in digital format at Amazon.com, Google Play, Draft2Digital, and other digital booksellers, or pick up your paperback copy on May 24th. New York Governor Kathy Hochul is putting together her own plan to tackle the crime that's going on in New York City's subway system.
We do want to begin tonight with the rising crime rate in New York on America's largest subway system, with millions of commuters and tourists riding every day. Well, now, an extraordinary new approach by the governor there to bring down crime in the Big Apple. The Democratic governor announcing a major crackdown. Hundreds of National Guard will begin tonight patrolling subway platforms and checking riders' bags. The show of force comes after a recent spike in crime in the underground transit, including 3 killings since January. And even today, just hours after the announcement, a train conductor reported that she was hit in the head with a glass bottle. CBS's Elaine Quijano spoke with subway riders about the new security.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul's plan is aimed at improving subway rider safety, adding 1,000 more personnel, including 750 National Guard troops, to help with patrols and random bag searches.
Anyone looking to do harm or spread fear on our subways, you will be caught.
The move comes after a more than 46% spike in major crimes in the city's transit system in January compared to 2023. Across the country, CBS News polling shows crime is a top concern for voters. But data shows crime is down in big cities, including New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles.
In the daytime, I feel safe. Nighttime, I don't know, man. Because I be saying, where's the cops? You don't see them that much.
Already this year, there have been several high-profile crimes in New York's subway system, including 3 killings and a brutal attack on a conductor.
But you have to feel safe in the system, because I know how it plays on your psyche when you hear about some random acts of violence.
Danny Perlstein is with the transit advocacy group Riders Alliance.
With stationing troops there, that's going to create a heightened climate of fear of the subway. It's not getting at the root causes of the problems.
The governor's plan does include $20 million for mental health outreach.
In the morning, you see nothing but the homeless on the trains. I don't feel safe. Sometimes I just take the bus.
More than 3 million people ride the New York City transit system every day. But Nora, that is down from a peak of 5 million people per day before the pandemic.
All right, I know that's controversial. We'll be watching Elaine Quijano. Thank you.
Now, according to reports, New York Governor Kathy Hochul is planning on sending 1,000 members of the National Guard and state police into the New York City subway system to help deal with the rise in crime that has been going on over the course of a couple of weeks. And this is in addition to the response from New York Mayor Eric Adams, who wants to have New York police officers performing random bag searches in an effort to try to deter individuals who carry weapons from coming into the New York City subway system. Now, Kathy Hochul's whole policy is separate from New York Mayor Eric Adams, and she's kept her distance as related to her plan, which she spent $20 million on as related to the 5 points of it. And part of that plan proposes some things such as mental health services, and also proposes to ban individuals from the subway. And it's that whole 5-point plan that I believe is going to be a 5-point failure, because the entire approach to trying to deal with crime in the subways is coming from an emotional perspective, and that was shown by New York Governor Kathy Hochul's reaction to a statement that what if somebody didn't want their bag searched, and she said then they don't get to ride the subway. And that is an emotional response to a situation that has gotten out of control. And the situation in the subway basically has gotten out of control because of the knee-jerk reaction of Andrew Cuomo and Bill de Blasio as related to dealing with the criminal justice system here in New York. And because many of the members of the state legislature don't want to deal with that knee-jerk reaction to the whole situation of Kalief Browder, what we have is everything going into a major state of deterioration as related to the safety of New Yorkers in the New York City subway system. Now, how does this connect to the case of Kalief Browder? Well, when it came to the case of Kalief Browder, he was a young man who was arrested for allegedly stealing a backpack, and because Kalief Browder didn't get proper due process of law, what happened was he remained on Rikers Island for 3 years, and as he remained on Rikers Island for 3 years, his case wasn't heard, and because his case wasn't heard in the 180 days that the state is supposed to take in processing a criminal justice case, Kalief Browder wound up in Rikers Island for 3 years and then was eventually released, and after he was released, he wound up committing suicide. Now, after Kalief Browder's suicide, Andrew Cuomo and Bill de Blasio and members of the state legislature like Andrea Stewart-Cousins and Carl Heastie decided to implement policies to reform New York's bail system to make sure that individuals like Kalief Browder don't wind up being stuck inside of a place like Rikers Island to the point where they become so traumatized that they wind up committing suicide. And that's how we got the emotional reactionary bail reform laws that repealed cash bail here in New York State and New York City. And this is what led to the spike in crime that took place starting as far back as 2019, as many individuals who would have been basically remanded over to Rikers Island were released on their recognizance, because this basically tied the hands of judges as related to discerning who would get cash bail. And because those judges could not go out here and discern who would get cash bail, what happened is many of these individuals, once they get arrested and get put through central booking, what they do is get released once they go see the judge. And once they go see the judge, they are basically let out. And what happens in some cases is that these individuals wind up going out here and committing even more crimes. And as they go to commit more crimes, they go into the subways, because subways have nooks and crannies that these individuals can get away in, and nooks and crannies that they can take advantage of people. So what happens is you've got all of these individuals who would usually be in Rikers Island for a good 6 to 8 month period waiting for their case to be heard. And these individuals, what happens to them is that they wind up back out on the streets. And what that does is send a message to those individuals that they are not going to have to deal with a boundary as related to consequences and punishment. So this incentivizes those individuals to go out here and commit more crimes. And what's been happening is that these individuals are getting arrested 7, 8, 9, 10, even 20 times over. And since they get released, what they do is have more incentives to commit more crimes. Moreover, since they're getting away with being released for those misdemeanors, what these individuals do is escalate their behavior into committing felonies as they push the boundaries of what they can get away with under the law. And this is where the real problem is as related to all the crime in New York City subways. And the reason why you have all the crime in New York City subways isn't going to be dealt with as related to an army of cops. No, it has to do with the extremely dysfunctional criminal justice system in New York that has been hampered because of this bail reform law. And this bail reform law basically has turned New York City's criminal justice system into a revolving door for criminals, and it's created this revolving door, and that's what's incentivizing all of these individuals to further escalate their behavior from participating in misdemeanors and participating into felonies. And that's not going to be solved by a National Guardsman or state police. No, the only way you can solve this problem is to admit that the bail reform laws are complete failures, and the bail reform laws are complete failures because they didn't really solve the problem that started with Kalief Browder. No, the problem with Kalief Browder's case really started in the district attorney's office in the Bronx, because the district attorney in the Bronx really didn't have good time management, and that's what led to Kalief Browder's case falling through the cracks. Kalief Browder's case fell through the cracks because the district attorney didn't really care about the law to understand that defendants' cases need to be tried within 180 days or 6 months, and those cases need to be tried because that's all rights, parts of a person's constitutional rights to a speedy trial. And the whole case with Kalief Browder was he should have been released within 6 months if he was sent to Rikers Island, or he should have been released on his own recognizance on that day because the district attorney didn't have their case together. But the district attorney went out here and used technicalities to keep Kalief Browder in jail, and none of that has been solved as related to the issues of defendants. And that's why we have this spike in crime, because we have all of these district attorneys who are not really doing their job of processing cases. And that's the issue that many in the legislature and many of these guys like former Governor Andrew Cuomo and Bill de Blasio didn't understand. No, they were looking to virtue signal by saying, oh, we're giving Pookie a chance, not understanding that the way you give Pookie a chance is by setting hard boundaries and making sure that your criminal justice system is able to process individuals in a speedy manner, because a defendant is supposed to be innocent until proven guilty, and cash bail ensures that that individual will return to court for their appearance for their day in court. Unfortunately, what's going on here in New York City is they're trying to keep these defendants out, and as they keep these defendants out, what they do is commit more crimes. And as we're waiting for their day in court, they're creating more days in court. So this individual is basically coming in and out of the system. And Kathy Hochul thinks that she can go out here and put a Band-Aid on the bail reform bullet wound by bringing more cops into the subway. But bringing more cops into the subway really isn't going to stop any of the criminals. No, what you have to do is de-incentivize those criminals by making sure that you set a boundary such as cash bail, because cash bail is how you keep these individuals from going out here and having a motivation to escalate their behavior into going from misdemeanors to participating in felonies. When you have cash bail, what that does is it goes out here and it makes it where individuals who would think about committing a crime will think twice, because it's going to cost them either money as related to their savings, or it will cost them time in Rikers Island until their case is processed. And that will deter a lot of individuals from committing crimes as related to the subways, because they know that if they have to deal with time in Rikers Island and won't be kicked out, they know that there is a reason for them not to go out here and commit crimes. Moreover, with cash bail, what this does is it makes it where this individual has to come and appear in court and not disappear. So the real problem here is the bail reform law here in New York City and New York State. The bail reform law is a failure. Unfortunately, the state legislature run by Andrea Stewart Cousins and Carl Heastie, two black bootleg politicians, refuse to acknowledge that the bail reform law is a failure because in their eyes, the bail was hurting black and brown people, but many of these individuals who are committing crimes, this isn't about color or race. No, it's about individuals who are being incentivized to go out here and commit felonies. And this is what flies over the heads of people like Carl Heastie and Andrea Stewart Cousins. They don't understand that you cannot keep giving chances to Pookie and he keeps fucking them up, because every time Pookie gets a chance and fucks it up, you are making a situation where this individual may possibly be on the road to committing a serious felony, such as a murder. And the whole thing is we have to set a boundary as related to individuals, and that's what cash bail provided for the criminal justice system. Moreover, when DAs do their job and prosecute individuals, what this does is, again, deters individuals from believing that there's an incentive to commit crime. So what's going on here with the subways has to do with the broken criminal justice system here in New York that has basically been put into a dire place because of soft on crime prosecutors like Alvin Bragg, who would rather spend his time clout chasing by going after actors like Jonathan Majors and former President Donald Trump, rather than tackling all of the serious crime going on in the subways of New York City. And that's the main reason why Kathy Hochul's plan is basically just like insanity, because you're trying to do something like Eric Adams tried to do by putting more police officers inside, but if you don't get your courts right, then you're not going to be able to get a control on crime. So it's, again, basically putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound, because searching bags, like Eric Adams proposes, that's not going to stop criminals from coming into the subway system, because I saw this go on during 9/11, and what criminals will do is go to the next station in line, because there's no way that the city or the state can be able to fund police officers doing random bag searches at over 469 stations, because you would need thousands of officers, and the NYPD right now is hemorrhaging officers who are putting in their retirement. And when it comes to the National Guard, these people have jobs that they have to go back to. And when it comes to the state police, they have to do jobs in the state. So there's no way you can maintain this kind of policy. And that's why I say it's emotional and knee-jerk, because it's not really going to solve the problem. Yes, it's an empty gesture that will make people feel better, but it's not going to really solve the problem of crime in the subway, because the way you solve the problem of crime in the subway is by getting New York's criminal justice system back on track, by repealing these bail reform laws and getting the DA's office to stop participating in soft on crime approaches like Alvin Bragg, and also getting the DA's office to get on track as related to prosecuting cases, because people like Khalif Browder should not be falling through the cracks, because if you cannot prosecute a case in 180 days, then that case needs to be dropped and the charges need to be dropped. But again, the state doesn't want to take responsibility for those things, because what happens in the case of the state of New York is they would have to admit that policies like bail reform, which was established by an all-blue state legislature, are a complete failure. And many of those politicians like Andrea Stewart Cousins and Carl Heastie, these black politicians, don't want to admit failure, because admitting failure means that they would wind up losing their jobs in their districts. And many of these other politicians like Eric Adams and Kathy Hochul, this would mean that their jobs would basically be done at the time of 2025 and 2026, when it's time for them to get reelected. They know that if they admit that bail reform is a failure, this would open the door for a candidate like Lee Zeldin to come in and wind up winning that election, because he would approach on a hard-on crime thing, and we would see a red state legislature which would basically repeal these bail reform laws, which are shown to everyone to be certified failures, because the reason why we have the spike in crime in the subways is because of those bail reform laws that were established by Andrew Cuomo, Carl Heastie, and Andrea Stewart Cousins during the 2010s. And just as far back as 2019, we started to see the spike in crime, which escalated over the COVID pandemic and the lockdowns. And after the lockdowns finished, what we started to see was the continuation of this crime. And this continuation of crime continued to get worse. And it got worse because what's happening is that as New Yorkers are coming into the subways, they're seeing more crime because you're having all of these individuals. Some of them are homeless, and some of them have become drug addicts due to New York's legalization of weed, because a lot of these cases, I believe, are because a lot of these folks, as related to mental illness, a lot of them have become chemically imbalanced in their brains from smoking weed, which they get from all of the weed shops in the city. So all of this, what's going on in the city as related to the quality of life in the city and the subways being unsafe, is due to many of the policies established by Bill de Blasio, Andrew Cuomo, and Kathy Hochul and Eric Adams. They basically signed off on these policies, and now what they're looking to do is overcompensate by going out here and flooding the subways with police officers and bag searches. But that's not going to stop crime. No, it can't stop crime until you fix the criminal justice system. But fixing the criminal justice system means conceding that your position is a failure. And when it comes to the prideful blue politicians, they won't admit that their policies are a failure. No, they won't admit that their policies are a failure, because that means that they would have to put themselves at risk of losing an election. And that may possibly be happen because Kathy Hochul's approval rating is declining. Eric Adams' approval rating is at 28%. And that's all due to the far left policies that they continue to maintain, that were established by former Governor Andrew Cuomo, former Governor Bill de Blasio, and these policies are proving to be failures. But because these blue party politicians are just too proud to admit that their approaches to life are wrong, and that their idealized vision of New York is not really working out, what they're going to do is try to double down on these failed policies, double down by spending more money on these types of policies. And this is even as the state has a deficit of $4 billion. The city has a deficit of billions of dollars, but they still are trying to keep this going, even though their own president of the MTA acknowledged that the real problem is that revolving door that was established as related to bail reform. That is the real problem of why we have all of this crime in the subways, because if you don't set a boundary with your criminal justice system, if you don't set a boundary that lets criminals know they are going to be held accountable for their actions and their behaviors, what's going to happen is people are gonna go out here and believe that they can commit more crimes. And that's exactly what's been happening. Now, Kathy Hochul's reaction was to tell people if they didn't want their bag searched, they couldn't get on the subway. And again, that's going to get challenged by the ACLU as related to the Fourth Amendment. And this is a big disaster that any way you slice it, because if something goes bad, it's going to really embarrass Kathy Hochul, who came up with this plan, because if a black person or a minority gets shot by one of these police, that's going to turn into a disaster at the low end of the spectrum. And at the high end of the spectrum, this could again turn into a bigger disaster, because again, this doesn't stop Pookie and Ray Ray, because laws don't stop Pookie and Ray Ray. Police don't stop Pookie and Ray Ray. No, a criminal justice system that has all of its structure intact, that stops Pookie and Ray Ray, because the deterrent for Pookie and Ray Ray isn't just police. No, it's the fact that they will be taken out of circulation in the world that takes them out of having that incentive to escalate their behavior into committing crimes. And that's what bail reform does. It just incentivizes criminals to believe that if they can commit minor crimes, they won't get prosecuted and they can just disappear. But if you have that hard boundary in place, what it does is it stops criminals, and that's where we have the problem. Unfortunately, Kathy Hochul can't get Carl Heastie and Andrea Stewart Cousins to concede that bail reform is a failure, and they don't want to concede because nobody wants to lose their job, but they may wind up losing their jobs come Election Day. Now, if you want to pick up some of my positive black fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, you can find the books of the ISIS series, the Steam series, the John Haynes series, and the books of the Spencerella trilogy, my vampire novel Eternal Night, and my other books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Smashwords, the iBookstore, Google Play, and Barnes & Noble. And if you'd like to see me make more videos about life in New York City, you can send a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Coming to paperback and e-readers, Isis Dark Incubus. The goddess next door gets enthralled in a romantic entanglement with an evil incubus in this all-new Isis series adventure. Pre-order your copy of Isis Dark Incubus at Amazon.com and other online booksellers everywhere. Coming to paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, Illuminati. The man who rules the world takes on the head of the global elite in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Pre-order your copy of John Haynes, Illuminati on Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.